Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Lawn Dev Dad. In today's episode, we're going to look at mower maintenance. There are a lot of things that you can do to your lawnmower to make it run better. From sharpening the blade, changing the oil, spraying things underneath to help with the buildup. You have spark plugs, you have air filters, just a lot of different things that you should be aware of to keep your mower running its best. As you can see here, I have all kinds of different stuff. I have grinders to help with the sharpening tools, files, different sprays. Let's take a look at how to use all these and get a better idea of how to take care of a mower. The very first step that I do anytime I work on my mower, and everyone really should, is first turn off the fuel. So there's usually a little switch on the side or somewhere that you can just turn, and that cuts the fuel off. And then also find your spark plug, and if you just take the housing off the front, that'll disconnect that so it can't possibly start up while you're underneath there because, well, you know how tragic that would be. Then one of the first things that I check after I disconnect things is my air filter. I've read that you usually only have to replace them about every 2 seasons or around 150 hours of mowing, so it's not something that you necessarily need to check every single time. But, you know, check it a couple times a year at least to make sure there's not a lot of buildup in there, and just take it out and look at it and get any of the grass or dirt or gunk off of it. If you kind of tap it out and use a blower, you can get it out, and sometimes it gets caught in between the filters like you can see here a little bit, so I'll get a blower and I'll actually blow through the filter to try to get some of that grass out of there. But until it gets really gunked up, I generally don't entirely switch it out for a new one, just because, you know, when it's white and doesn't have a whole lot of stuff on it, it still filters pretty well. Really all there is to it, to cleaning out your air filter. Pretty easy. Now for the fun stuff, all the grass buildup that you get underneath. Even when I use sprays and things to try to reduce it and try not to mow when it's wet, I still end up always getting quite a bit underneath here. So I generally start by taking off the blades, and then I'll go through and scrape as much as I can off of there. And then I'll sometimes use like a brush, a bristle brush, and a hose to get everything else that I possibly can off. So to take the blade off, you can use a tool like this. On my mower, it doesn't quite fit because the double blade design doesn't allow it to fit over both blades. So I can't really use it the way it's supposed to be used. One thing I can do is turn it around so that the blade actually goes up against it, but also sometimes I'll just use a block of wood to wedge it in there. Basically, you just want to make it so that your blades don't spin when you're trying to either tighten or loosen the bolts, because mine go on at about 40 foot-pounds, so it takes a little bit of torque to get those things on and off of there, so you need something to hold the blade so that it doesn't spin or you don't cut yourself slipping. So these are the options to do that. So let's see the cleaning process. The sad part about this is I just cleaned this about 3 or 4 weeks ago, so I haven't really mowed all that much to get this much buildup, but all it takes is 1 or 2 mowings where it's not, perfectly dry for things to just gunk up and stick. And so you got to get under there and you really got to try to clean things out if you want it to run its best and have the proper airflow, and especially when you're mulching. I don't even have a side discharge on this mower, and I almost never bag unless I'm dethatching or I have a lot of weeds or disease or something that I'm trying not to spread. So now that we got the worst of it off, we're gonna just basically use a hose and rinse and then scrub to try to get the parts that didn't come off, and then rinse again, repeat until you have it to a place where you're pretty happy with the results. After I'm all done, I like to use a blower to kind of get all the water out of places, especially the top, just to make sure, it's not sitting anywhere it shouldn't be. And then after I get it pretty good, I'll flip it and get the underneath, and then I pretty much just let it drip dry the rest of the way. And then I'll move on to sharpening the blades or something else while I'm waiting it to dry enough to be able to put the ceramic coatings and things underneath. I will wipe it down one last time just to get any loose parts off of there, and the remaining grass and stuff if I can get to it. I recommend using some kind of a vise or other device to be able to keep the blades completely stationary when you're trying to sharpen them. You don't want things moving around when you have, sharp blades and grinders and other things. So as you can see, the blades get pretty dirty. You have a bunch of different grinder discs that you use. Some people like different ones. I bought a couple different kinds just to try them out. Different grit. This is an 80. Then I have some 40s, and I think I have a 60 on there right now. So I've seen reviews for every one of them saying they're the best ones ever, but I don't think it makes that big of a difference as long as you're consistent and make sure that you get things at a good angle. I also like to use this wire brush to get all of the grass buildup and other junk off of the blades instead of using sandpaper or something like that. So basically it just spins and gets all the gunk off the blades so that you kind of start fresh. The angle grinder is the main thing that I use first, just to get the worst of it down, and that gets a good start, and then I'll move to different files and things to be able to hone it down even further. I have this edge sharpening tool too that I use to be able to set the edge really good, and then this ultra fine file here that I use just for finishing things off to get it burr free and just ultra smooth as much as I can. But let's go ahead and take a look at that process and see how to get things cleaned and sharpened. You have to be very careful when using a wire brush on a grinder, because if you hold it the wrong way, it's going to want to constantly pull away and I found that holding it in this direction, putting downward pressure on it, where it wants to pull forward instead of side to side, is by far the easiest. If I go in from the side or a different angle, it just always wants to fight me. So just doing it from top down, pushing down into it so that it wants to pull the wheel forward as I'm cleaning is extremely easy compared to other ways. Onto the sharpening. First thing you want to do is just try to get that same angle that's already on the blade and just basically get it so it's super shiny along that edge. So you just got to take it easy and see where it's hitting, and if there's still dark spots, just adjust the angle slightly, go back and forth, not pushing too hard, just to get just the edge off so that you can kind of see a nice bare shiny metal area. And then you'll just want to do that on both sides. And go over it a few times, nice and slow, just to try to get everything as good as you can with that first shot before you start using the other tools to get things even sharper. Next, I use this somewhat coarse file just to kind of get any other edges off that the grinder wasn't able to get. Just kind of go along the edge and try to make sure everything is as smooth as possible before going on to the finishing files to get things super sharp. Next, I like to use this finishing file. One side is fine and the other is ultra fine, so it's really just for finish work after things are as close as they can be, just to get any of that edge that you need to smooth out perfect, basically. So I will go over it with this just once real quick with each. There really shouldn't be any resistance, and then I will use this edge tool to basically get the perfect edge on there. Make sure to hold things so that it doesn't move around like it just did there. But so I'll go over it 4 or 5 times with this just to basically set that perfect edge. And it's funny because if you get it close, you almost can't feel any resistance when you do this. But I just like to do it just to get that razor sharp edge on there, and then I go over it one more time with the ultra fine just to get any little burrs or things off. And then I actually have the case for this file is leather to be able to kind of just smooth out that final edge and just get things basically razor sharp. Now that I have everything really cleaned up and I have all this exposed bare metal, it's gonna rust if I don't do something. And since I do several blades at once, I sometimes store them for a month or so before I put them on. So I like to put a protectant on just to be able to kind of keep them in as good a condition as I can. Now that we have things cleaned up and sharpened on the outside, let's deal with the gunk on the inside by changing the oil. First, you want to run for probably 5 minutes or so just to warm things up. It helps the oil come out a lot easier than if you don't. Now there's a couple different ways that you can change your oil. You can just tip the thing over and let it drain out, and that works fine, but it's kind of messy, so I've tried some different tools over the years. I recently just got this fluid pump, I guess it's called, and this is the first time I ever tried to use it, so I wasn't exactly sure, how it would work. At first I was not able to get much out of there, and then I realized, oh, well, I have to still tip it a little bit to get the oil down at the bottom to actually lean this way so that I can get it. But my idea is that if I do this, I can get the majority of it out and put it right back into the empty bottle that I poured it from originally, that I keep, so that I can properly dispose of it. So basically just take out a couple syringes full of that, and then with a little bit that's left over that you can't quite get to, just pour it in the pan and pour that into the bottle, seal it up, and take it to your oil recycling location. I'm amazed how many times I see people post something about how they had their blades on upside down and they didn't realize it for weeks or months. So just either take a picture beforehand or look at the user manual or just look online. I mean, there are ways to easily tell which way your blade should be going on. Like for some it won't even really fit on properly, but for others you can put them on backwards and it'll still work, it just won't cut very well. So there you have it for mower maintenance. I hope it helped out with any questions you had and gave you some ideas on how to make things easier and make your mower run the best that it can. Thanks for watching. See you next time.